I'm going to walk you through inspecting a crankshaft before you do an engine rebuild. This one is from a 7.3 Powerstroke. First, you should check to see if you have any grooves here. And also just inspect the surface, see what it looks like. I went over this whole crankshaft with the Scotch-Brite to just kind of polish it up and clean it up and make it look more uniform. Something I learned from one of the sons of a guy that worked with and built motors with NASCAR with the Wood Brothers. So that's where I learned that from. There's one thrust bearing that's in the back on this engine. So what you would check for is you could check the side of that bearing. You can see it has a little bit of wear, but this is getting replaced anyway. You want to check the side of the crank where that rides up against. This one looks good. If I had to guess, there probably should be 2/1000ths of clearance between the side wall of this bearing and the crankshaft. The purpose of this bearing is it limits the travel of the crankshaft from moving this way and back this way. When you have a manual transmission and you press in the clutch, it puts this pressure on that crankshaft to push it in. So this bearing helps deflect that pressure so that the whole crankshaft won't move forward. You could take a mic and mic the measurements of your mains and your rod journals. I did that to make sure this crankshaft was not machined before to have oversized bearings and an undersized dimension on the crank and an oversized bearing to match. You're not supposed to lay them down like that. If you do, what I would do is I would just put supports underneath the mains. And if you want to stand it up straight, like people say that you're supposed to do, so they supposedly don't bend, the way I would handle that is I would stand it up straight and tie it to a post. This crankshaft can be inspected with Plastigauge when installed, but before we do that, what I'm going to do with this is completely clean the whole crankshaft before installing it, because I just got all this rubbed down with the Scotch-Brite, and there's a lot of Scotch-Brite left in the oil holes. The way these oil holes run, the mains receive oil from the block. The oil will travel through the crankshaft up into the rods, to the rod bearings. So you want to run a brush all the way from here to there, all the way down through the end of the crank there, or that journal there, and then from here to there. And you should have one that goes here to there, here to there. Oh wait, yeah, that's right. And here to there, there to there, and that one will run to there, and this one will run back to here. This crankshaft has a lot of sharp edges. I've cut my fingers several times on this. I decided to file them. You don't want to like mess up the balance or anything, but I was kind of getting irritated with how many times I was cutting my fingers when I was trying to sand it. So I just filed some of the sharp edges down. It's really important to pay attention to the orientation of your bearings, because you have one bearing that has an oil hole and the other one's solid and has no oil hole. The one with the oil hole goes on the block side, and then the one that is solid goes on the cap side. If you flip these around, you won't have any oil pressure going to the crankshaft, and you'll completely destroy the engine. I actually know somebody that did that personally, and it did not go well. Eventually it spun a rod bearing. This crankshaft has a groove in the back of it. This is where the rear main seal has been digging into the crankshaft over time. At least that's my theory. I mean, I guess they could have machined it like that, but I kind of think that that's not the way it's supposed to be made. It makes you wonder, are you supposed to replace it because of that? I don't know. The crankshafts do have these drilled holes. Those are all balancing marks when this crankshaft was balanced out at the factory. That's all for the tips on the crankshaft inspection. If you want to follow along with my 7.3 Powerstroke build, I'm rebuilding that engine in the next week or two, and I'm going to have a couple videos on what I'm going through and seeing with problems and correcting them as I go.